Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick. I'm here with Mike and Kieran, and today is the second in our series of best running watch videos. We're doing different categories in each one. We've done the best beginner watches already. We're now moving on to the best value running watches. Now, the key for value here is getting a lot of features for the price, in our opinion. So it's a great balance of features and price. It's not just very, very cheap watches. It's also watches that are a bit more expensive but are coming in significantly cheaper than other watches that have similar features. And we're going to do a couple of watches that are just cheap generally. They've got a very good kind of list price or retail price, and then a few that are now so consistently in sales. I think it's very much worth flagging them up because those kind of watches in the real world you're looking and seeing for a really good price and considering buying, especially in a big sales period like Black Friday right now when watches are everywhere are being reduced. So the first one we're going to flag up is the one I think we all agreed we probably thought was the best value watch overall if we are looking at it, because it's a slightly older watch. It's the Garmin Forerunner 255. There's a music version, a non-music version, a small version crucially, and a bigger version, so it's very good for small wrists. Even the bigger version is pretty good for small wrists. It's been around for a few years. It's basically the last of the two X5 series after the very popular 235, 245, then the 255, and now it's gone AMOLED with the 265, which means the older watch is a lot cheaper. It's not AMOLED, but you still get dual band tracking. It's a multi-sport watch. It's very accurate, and it's usually now in sales for, you're probably looking at £100, £200 less than the Forerunner 265. Hard really not to rate this as a very good value watch. It's fair to say, Kieran.
Yeah, again, it's like this one, I think if you went back in time when we were doing kind of reviews and the 265 and all these other watches didn't exist, this would have been one of our top picks back in the day. And yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating question. People always go to me, when should we upgrade? Do these watches... If someone landed that watch and you hadn't seen the new ones and we were all running with the 255, we'd be perfectly happy with the capability of it, right? And if you can get it at a knockdown deal, it will cover everything you really need it to do on a run. If you've never seen an AMOLED screen, you can pretend that you haven't, and you're not drawn to that kind of bright, shiny. It's a fully featured, very capable watch with decent battery life. I think, all the relative accuracy that you need, and yeah, I think I'm kind of saying that if everything else got wiped out and someone handed you a 255, you'd run with it very happily. So if you can get it cheap, and that's you're on a budget, then you're not compromising in too many areas, really.
No, I think a couple of features you're missing out on, things like training readiness. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people might consider bells and whistles you're missing out on. I mean, you don't get a very hardy design, it's fair to say, Mike, or very long battery life, but otherwise you're pretty much set, right?
I mean, for me, like particularly what we've seen with the 265, and it's kind of slightly moved out of that mid-range price status in terms of where it sits, where this very much does sit at mid-range. And now if you look around the sales, I mean, I've seen it for around £200, £220. That is a very good deal for a watch. That's effectively the same as a 265, minus really that AMOLED display. I would say it's getting you a bit more in terms of battery life, kind of day to day. So you're going to get a little bit more out of it from that point of view. I found that I think that something that really stood out for me was the heart rate performance. I know we don't all kind of all bank on kind of optical heart rate. If you're really kind of trusting that for training and you're from a kind of heart rate based point of view, but ultimately if you were and you didn't want to kind of pair it up with external heart rate monitor, I found that it's been very good overall. So I think there are some definite kind of qualities there in the 255. I say ultimately my experience has been very similar to the 265 from a core run tracking experience. I think smartwatch experience as well too. If you can live without that AMOLED display, that drop in price isn't giving you a kind of drop in terms of features.
No, fantastic watch, and yeah, definitely one that's going to be in the sales a lot. And then we're moving to a watch that is very rarely reduced. This is the Coros Pace 3. And generally, Coros don't do big reductions on their watches. Their statement is basically that we price watches lower than other brands, and so we don't need to reduce them. And it is kind of true, because most of the time the brands that compete with Coros is because their watches do get reduced, something like the 255. But the Pace 3 at its full price is an incredible package, I would say. It's a full multi-sport watch. You're getting the same training analysis you get on Coros's top watches. You're getting pretty good battery life. It's a dinky little plastic thing, which I think has quite an appealing design. It might not appeal to everyone because it is a small plastic watch, but it is really lightweight, and that's something that a lot of watches are going away from. They seem to be getting heavier in general. It's a very lightweight, really high performance watch, one of my favourites in general, and also really good value. So yeah, Kieran, you love the Pace 3 as well, right?
No, this is a watch that's already represents good value. I agree. Yeah, it does. It covers a lot of the bases. Bang for buck in all the reviews that I've done when I've written this up. Bang for buck when you compare it to watches that are much pricier. This sort of comes in and competes really nicely. Good design, good reliability in terms of the accuracy, really good battery life, which I love. And yeah, I think just represents really nice value.
I think the biggest takeaway for me, I think it's really important in terms of the Coros kind of ecosystem, is it's really trying to and striving to kind of have the same software experience across its watches, and that includes the Pace 3 as well too. So while it might not match the Vertix and the Apex in all aspects from a hardware point of view, the software, Coros is really striving to kind of make sure that it's consistent. So going cheaper doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna miss out on all these big software features that Coros is talking about. It tries its hardest to make sure that it's rolling back to its most affordable watches. So I think that's a real kind of important thing for me, that your watch is going to improve, and you're not going to sit there and watch other people with an Apex and Vertix and think, I'd love to have that software feature, because Coros is really trying to make it consistent across its range.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, next watch I'm going to throw at you is one. It's the Suunto Race S. Now, Suunto has not been known, I think it's fair to say, for being making great value watches. And then suddenly the Suunto Race came out, which was very good value for its price. And then the Suunto Race S came out, which is a smaller version of the watch, but has all the same kind of features. You've got dual band GPS, you've got a really kind of accurate tracking in quite an attractive and hard wearing display, and it's really cheap. So it's a mid-range watch, but it's undercutting the other big hitters in this area, like the Pace Pro, the Vantage M3, Garmin Forerunner 265. It's kind of undercutting all of those watches whilst offering nearly all the same features and a slightly hardier design. And you're not just getting an all plastic watch here, you're getting quite a bit of metal on there, nice hard screen, and it's got a pretty good tracking experience all round as well. So I don't know if you've tested this, Kieran, but Mike, you have, right? And it's just surprised all of us how good this watch is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a classic example of don't judge a watch by its price, because I think people would probably look at it and think, it's going to be just another kind of mid-range watch. But, it's effectively taken what we really liked. I think probably it's one of the watches has really surprised us in terms of performance, in terms of what is on offer here, and gives you that for less money. And I think what's really impressed me from a Suunto point of view has been their kind of dual bands kind of application to its watches, how that kind of experience is in terms of battery life. I think the mapping support as well too. That core experience is very, very good. And I think there's some areas where I think ultimately it can improve. It's not alone on that. I think particularly from a kind of presentation and its kind of training and analysis side of things. But what it will do is make sure that it's going to play with other kind of third-party platforms, and giving you the scope to kind of share that information in the places that you maybe potentially do use from a training point of view. But I think, ultimately it is sat at a mid-range price, but it has got the features that, ultimately is going to let it compete with kind of much, more expensive watches that we all kind of, like, but ultimately Suunto is going to give it to you for less.
I've actually been testing the titanium version, which is a bit more expensive, bit more premium materials, but it's still good value actually. And actually, in terms of the way it operates, it does everything else exactly the same as the non-titanium version. And I think I completely agree with you. This has been a bit of a surprise. It's been a while since I strapped on a Suunto watch and actually felt really positive about it. And this one has been a bit of an eye-opener. I think it's kind of hit a sweet spot. They've done something very clever here in terms of offering that kind of full breadth of features, lots of the kind of hardware and functionality that you're going to want, but they've come in at that price point. It feels like they've done a little bit of a Coros in this and made it just so much more attractive. There to the point where there are things that I don't necessarily like about the Suunto kind of platform. I've never been in love with their UI. I find it very hard to navigate sometimes. I know that you get used to watches, but I have to get used to this one a little more than others. But there's some of those things that have always been a bit of a bugbear with me that I'd be willing to forego a bit more because of the performance and the breadth of features and just the way it looks. I think it's a really nice looking watch, and everything that you're getting out of this package is there's a lot more to like than dislike, and it's been a while since I've sort of felt that about Suunto.
100%. I don't think we even said this at any point, but it's an AMOLED watch. It's got a lovely AMOLED screen. And this is one that we're talking about as great value at its full price. But Suunto, unlike Coros, does reduce watches, so you might even get a better deal on this watch from time to time. But I 100% agree with all the kind of little annoying quirks about the UI in Suunto's interface, which always annoyed me in all the reviews, are still present on this watch, but you just kind of forgive them because it is really good value and it does other stuff really well. Whereas in the past, they really annoyed me even more because you're paying so much for a watch that wasn't competing. So yeah, really massive hat tip to Suunto for the Race and the Race S coming in, really good value, and taking it to Garmin, like you say, Kieran. Like they've done a Coros, but actually even undercut the Coros Pace Pro a little bit in the UK in particular. So very good value watch. Then a couple other picks we have in this category are going to be Garmin watches that are going on sale, and this is, I think, the big problem actually most brands have with releasing watches that are good value is that, yeah, but you're actually competing with last year's Garmin on sale, which still has more features and is now, same kind of price. A couple of the big ones here. So one is the Garmin Forerunner 955. So this is the last 9.5 watch. So the 96, that wasn't an AMOLED watch. The 965 brought in an AMOLED screen, but it is still very much up to date with all of Garmin's top software features. You've got dual band GPS, you've got offline maps. It's basically a top Garmin in a lightweight plastic design with a memory and pixel display. Now, you're not going to get that in the future. I think from now on, you're only going to get top watches with AMOLED displays, and they're going to start introducing more and more metal. So last chance for this kind of watch. It's still an amazing watch, very accurate, full featured, dropping in sales now. So I think this watch going to start hovering in the low 300s, do we think, that kind of price?
Yeah, I think so. I think at the moment it's probably under 400, but given what's happening elsewhere in Garmin's range, it seems inevitable that it will drop, and it's essentially a bit like the 265, 255 kind of situation ultimately, where you're effectively paying for that AMOLED display and you're paying a premium for it. But if you can live without that, everything you're going to get on the 955, from a functionality point of view, I think largely from a design point of view, to feel very similar. It's not a huge, large watch like the kind of more expensive Phoenix ranges, but it's going to give you that kind of level of support in terms of mapping, in terms of navigation, in terms of that multi-band support as well too. And yeah, I think considering I think it's very likely it's going to drop even less than it already is now. It's going to be an option for a lot of people, I think, who want that kind of a little bit more in terms of that overall kind of comprehensive kind of feature set, but ultimately maybe wanted for a bigger watch than the 265 and 255 will give you.
Definitely, and it is a high-end watch. It's it's not that cheap, but it's definitely good value. There's also the Forerunner 945, which is the previous version. Now, all of these older watches, you're going to struggle a bit in terms of you're not going to get that many software updates going forward. I think the 945 is now out of the Garmin cycle, but I have seen it today for well under 300. So that's an interesting watch in that case. That's still a very good watch, but 955 is probably the more. It gives you more value in terms of future-proofing a little bit more, I would say. The last watch, though, Garmin Fenix 8 has just come out. The Garmin Fenix 8 has just come out, which has replaced the Epix Pro and Fenix 7 Pro lines. Also, the Epix 2 and Fenix 7 have kind of now been superseded by two watches, which means there are great deals to be had on what were, the top watches in Garmin's range, 1 or 2 or 3 years ago max, and these are still outstanding watches. So Fenix 7 is certainly one that's going to be in sales a lot, but the one that's standing out for me a lot, every time I look at this on Amazon, it seems an amazing deal, which is the Garmin Epix 2. It's always the white titanium version. Now, the key is the titanium version of the Epix 2 is the one that has dual band GPS as well as a sapphire screen, whereas the base steel model doesn't have dual band GPS and is a bit heavier. So the Epix 2, I think, is one of the best value watches on the market these days because it is dropping to under £400 in some places. It's usually $450, I noticed, in America, and that is still basically a top-of-the-range Garmin in many ways. Like, you miss out. The new Fenix 8 now has things like a mic and speaker. It's got a better optical heart rate monitor. You've got a new user interface. How much that bothers you, I don't know. But you have got pretty much all the same software features. You do not get a flashlight, which is a bit gutting. So I think, this is the watch I used for a year and loved, and there is upgrades of the Epix Pro and the Fenix 8, but I can't help but think this is unbelievable value, given that you are basically getting a top software and feature an AMOLED screen Garmin watch for so much less than the new models. What do you guys think of this? Kieran, come on, tell me I'm right.
No, you are. Although it would never have been my first choice of watch out of the whole range. But when you put it like that and you couch it and you're putting it up against, there are new bells and whistles on the Fenix 8, and there's some sort of fun tools in there, the voice notes, the sort of voice activation of certain things, and that new UI. But I don't think they're not deal breakers. They're not particularly. They're good to have. They're nice to have. But I think, if you can save hundreds of pounds on having £100 on having a watch that's got the very similar functionality, I wouldn't be leaping to spend the extra on the Garmin 8. So this is going to look very good value by comparison.
I think for me, it's like, it was probably the first example of an AMOLED Garmin where I felt, along with the 965, where it's like you're going to get the battery life that you kind of still crave and you're willing to make compromises with. But I think ultimately what that price is going to do is put it up against things in Garmin's own range, which have AMOLED displays like the 265, I think. And it's ultimately like, well, do I go for the 265 or do I go for this? Granted, they're different in terms of design, but in terms of what you're getting for your money, for probably a little bit less money than that watch, you're getting a lot more. And I think it feels like a no-brainer if you want that kind of more rugged design, kind of more of those kind of latest kind of kind of hardware innovations that Garmin has done with the Epics, then I think, you know, this is the one that kind of stands out, because it's dropping alongside a lot of other Garmin watches that you think, well, it seems like this is the one that you should be going for.
Yeah, it is. If you wanted, we've talked a lot about kind of lightweight watches in this area. Often they are the ones that are a bit better value, but this is, you know, the full deal, especially the titanium model, rugged, all that kind of stuff. Just a great watch, and a watch that is a real killer for lots of new watches, even from Garmin themselves. I think these days, when you launch a premium top-end AMOLED watch and you go, well, the Epix 2 is £300 cheaper straight away. Again, not looking at that. You know, you have been updated up to this point with the Epix 2, but you're not going to get the new user interface on the Phoenix 8. There's going to be some stuff phased out, I'm sure, but for a watch that came out, I think, in early 2022, it still very much stands up as one of the best on the market, I think, and certainly good value, which is the whole theme of this video. So now we're going to attempt a really flawless goodbye from all of us. But thanks very much for watching. We've also got the best beginner watches up already. We have got some others to come. We're going to do best high-end watches. We'll talk about watches that cost a lot more than the Epix 2. We're going to do best smart watches for a full smart experience. And we're going to do best mid-range watches, because it's suddenly got very hot in the mid-range category of late with 2 new watches coming out. But for now, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Yeah, beautiful.